Welcome to Mini Stories, where we will be listening to the story, Love in a Uniform. I always knew I was destined to be in law enforcement. Ever since I was a little girl, I idolized my father, a respected detective in the city. His stories of crime solving and helping people ignited something in me. By the time I was 18, I knew I was following in his footsteps. I entered the police academy, determined to make a difference. The first few years were tough. I was one of only a handful of women in a department filled with men who had been in the force for decades. I had to prove myself over and over, working harder, running faster, and keeping my emotions in check. As I rose through the ranks, I became accustomed to the challenges. The job wasn't easy, but it was mine, and I was good at it. My name is Kate Ellis, and I'm a homicide detective in one of the toughest districts in the city. I've solved more than my fair share of cases, but this one was different. It started with a series of strange murders, each with no clear connection, until we discovered a pattern. A signature. Someone was targeting women, and it felt personal. The day I met him was the same day I was assigned to work with a new partner. Chapter 1, The New Partner. It was a Monday morning when my boss dropped the news. "Kate, I want you to meet your new partner, Detective Adam Carter. He's just transferred from Vice. You two will be handling the Brooks case together." I looked up from my desk. Adam was tall, with messy brown hair and eyes that seemed to hold more secrets than I could count. His jawline was sharp, and there was a quiet confidence about him. I couldn't help but notice how effortlessly he carried himself. Something about him felt different from the usual, cocky detectives I was used to. "Nice to meet you," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he was just as wary of me as I was of him. "Same," I replied, giving him a short nod. I didn't have time for small talk. We needed to figure out who was behind these murders, and I wasn't about to waste time on pleasantries. Chapter 2, First Impressions. The first few days of working with Adam were challenging. We were thrown into the chaos of the investigation, gathering evidence and interviewing witnesses. But as time went on, I began to notice something strange. Adam wasn't like the other detectives. He wasn't arrogant or self-serving. He was quiet, observant, and incredibly methodical. And what struck me the most was his empathy. He seemed genuinely concerned for the victims, often pausing to take a moment for the families we interviewed. At first, I kept my distance. I had been burned before by getting too close to someone on the job. The risks, the late nights, the constant danger, it wasn't easy to maintain any kind of personal connection. But Adam's presence was different. He didn't try to break through my walls. Instead, he just quietly respected them. One night, after we'd been working late on a case, we found ourselves alone in the precinct office. I was sitting at my desk, sifting through files when Adam spoke. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low. I looked up, surprised. "Yeah, why?" He gave me a small smile. "You've been pushing yourself too hard. I've been watching you. You don't take breaks, and you rarely leave the office." I shrugged. "It's part of the job. We're not in this to take it easy." Adam leaned back against the doorframe, studying me. "I know that. But you can't keep going like this. I've seen it before. Burnout." I wanted to push him away, tell him I didn't need a lecture. But something in the sincerity of his voice made me pause. For the first time in a long while, I felt like someone actually cared. "I'll be fine," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed my own words. He gave me a look that said he didn't buy it, but he didn't push me further. "If you ever need to talk," he said quietly, "I'm here." Chapter 3, The Turning Point. The investigation continued, and with every lead, we seemed to get closer to finding the killer. But it was exhausting. The cases were grueling, the pressure immense. And as much as I tried to keep my emotions in check, I started to feel the weight of everything. One night, we were both called to the scene of a fresh murder. The victim, another woman, had been found in a deserted alley, her body left in a way that mirrored the previous ones. We were on edge, knowing we were close to cracking the case, but not knowing how close the killer was to slipping through our fingers. The scene was chaotic, but we worked in tandem, without speaking. It was like we had a rhythm, my mind moving a mile a minute while Adam was the calm to my storm, always keeping me grounded. After the scene was cleared, we found ourselves at a small cafe near the precinct, both too wired to go home. I ordered a coffee, my fingers shaking slightly from the adrenaline still coursing through me. "You know, you're different from everyone I've worked with," Adam said, breaking the silence. His eyes were soft but intense, and I could tell there was something he wanted to say but wasn't sure how to. "How so?" I asked, my voice tight. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. "You care. I've seen it in the way you speak to the families of the victims. You listen to them. You feel for them. It's rare to see that in this line of work." I laughed bitterly. "It's hard not to care when you see people's lives destroyed." "I know," he said quietly. "But not everyone allows themselves to feel. It's easier to distance yourself." "And you?" I asked, surprised by how personal the conversation had become. "Do you distance yourself?" Adam's gaze held mine, and for a moment, I saw a vulnerability I hadn't expected. "I used to. But I don't anymore. Not with this case. Not with you." My heart skipped a beat, but I pushed the feeling aside. He didn't mean it like that. It was just the stress, the case, it was messing with my mind. Before I could say anything, he stood up. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "No, it's fine," I said, cutting him off. "We should get back to the case." Chapter 4, The Confession. The case had reached its culmination. The murderer had been apprehended. The press releases were sent out. The families of the victims had finally gotten the justice they deserved, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. But I wasn't sure I wanted to breathe, at least, not without Adam beside me. The investigation had been grueling. There were long nights spent sifting through evidence, endless hours spent talking to witnesses, and the constant pressure to solve the case. But as the nights wore on, something inside me shifted. Adam was no longer just my partner. He had become something more, a constant in the chaos. I found myself looking forward to our late-night stakeouts, the soft exchange of glances over files, the shared understanding that passed between us. He had been there in a way no one else could, quietly supporting me when the weight of the job became too much. And when the case was finally closed, I found myself wanting to hold on to him in a way I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about the work anymore, it was about us. That evening, the precinct had emptied out. The city outside seemed quieter than usual, the hum of life dulled by the weight of the last few weeks. I stood on the roof, looking out over the skyline, trying to push the tumult of emotions swirling inside me. I had always been in control, at least, I thought I had been. But standing there, my thoughts were anything but organized. I hadn't known that working alongside Adam would change everything for me. I heard footsteps behind me, the soft sound of boots against concrete. Without turning around, I knew it was him. Adam had become a presence I couldn't ignore. "You're still here," he said softly, his voice cutting through the silence. "I couldn't leave just yet," I replied, my eyes fixed on the city below. "Feels like I've spent so much time running after the case, I forgot to stop and breathe." He came to stand beside me, close but not too close, as if respecting some invisible boundary. We stood there for a moment, both lost in our thoughts. Finally, Adam spoke, his voice hesitant. "Kate. I've been meaning to talk to you. There's something I need to say, and I don't think I can ignore it anymore." I turned to face him, confusion and curiosity swirling in my chest. His expression was serious, his eyes searching mine as though looking for something. I tried to keep my emotions in check, but the moment felt charged, like something important was on the verge of being said. "Adam, what's going on?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a deep breath, his gaze dropping to the ground for a brief second before locking onto mine. "I can't keep pretending like nothing's changed between us. I've been trying to ignore it, trying to keep it professional, but I can't anymore." My heart began to race, and I felt a lump form in my throat. I had been trying to ignore it too, the way his presence had started to affect me in ways I hadn't anticipated. The way my thoughts often wandered to him, even when I was supposed to be focused on the case. But I never let myself acknowledge it. We were partners, and that was the priority. But now, with his words hanging in the air, I couldn't deny the truth any longer. There was something between us. Something unspoken, but undeniable. I'm not sure what you mean, I said, though the doubt in my voice betrayed the uncertainty I was feeling. He stepped closer, closing the distance between us. I mean that I care about you, Kate. More than I should. More than I've ever let myself care about anyone. And I can't keep pretending that this is just a partnership. You're not just my partner, Kate. You are. His words trailed off for a moment, as if he were trying to find the right ones, but they never came. I swallowed hard, my breath caught in my chest. He was standing so close now, and I could feel the heat of his body next to mine. I wanted to take a step back, to keep the wall I had built around myself intact. But his words had broken through, and there was nothing I could do to stop what was happening. I started to speak, but I was cut off by the vulnerability in his eyes. You don't have to say anything if you're not ready. But I had to tell you. Because I can't work with you, look at you, and pretend that I don't feel something. I was shaking, and I wasn't sure if it was from the cold or from the emotions swirling inside me. This wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to fall for him. But in that moment, standing there with him under the city lights, everything I had been hiding came to the surface. I was afraid, scared that if I let myself feel for him, it would ruin everything. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. I stepped closer to him, my voice barely a whisper. I feel the same way. I've been trying to fight it, but I can't anymore. It's not just the case, Adam. It's you. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, his gaze softening, his eyes warm with an emotion I had never seen before. And then, without another word, he leaned down and kissed me. It wasn't a desperate kiss, but it was full of everything we had both been holding back. His lips were gentle, but firm, as if conveying everything we hadn't said in words. I responded instinctively, my hands moving to his shoulders, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. When we finally pulled away, we were both breathless, our foreheads resting against each other as we tried to steady ourselves. I don't want to complicate things, I said quietly, my breath still shallow. This job, it's hard enough as it is. We can't let this get in the way. I know, he said softly, his voice steady. But I can't ignore what's happening between us, Kate. We can't ignore it. And I don't want to. I closed my eyes, leaning into him. Neither do I. Chapter 5, Love in the Line of Duty. Our relationship wasn't easy. We had to keep it quiet for a while, both of us knowing how complicated things could get if the department found out. But it didn't matter. Because with Adam, I had found something I had never experienced before, someone who truly understood me, who accepted me for who I was, both as a cop and as a woman. We eventually told our colleagues, and to our surprise, they were supportive. The case had brought us closer, but it was more than that. We had learned to trust each other in ways I had never trusted anyone before. And when the time came, I knew I was ready to take the next step. Adam and I got married in a small ceremony, just close friends and family. Our love had been forged in the fires of our work, but it had grown into something strong and beautiful. We knew the dangers that came with our careers, but we faced them together, side by side. And as we stood there, hand in hand, I realized that no matter what came next, whether it was the next case or the next challenge, I had found my partner, in every sense of the word. In the line of duty, and in life, I had finally found my love. The end. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, like, comment, share and subscribe.